Glory to the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, one true God. Amen. Welcome to Urho, the Way, an online outreach ministry to disseminate the love of triune God through the life and witness of the Syriac Orthodox Church. Hope you all had a great time watching and listening to the lecture series on Philoxenos of Marburg by Dr. Robert Kitchen. This evening, we have an excellent guest, Dr. Michael Wingert. Dr. Michael Wingert, he had a Ph.D. in Near Eastern Language and Cultures from the University of California, Los Angeles. He has teaching assignments with various universities and colleges like UCLA, Fuller Theological Seminary, and he was instrumental and contributed to the development of Agora University. And he's also part of the Syriac Orthodox Patriarchal Mission Committee. So with that brief introduction, let me welcome Dr. Michael Wingert to Urho, the Way.
Baruch Mor Achen, thank you very much. I don't know about excellent or exciting, but I might disappoint your viewers. But I'll try my best. I'll get my juggling balls out if things get boring.
Well, this is a blessed moment. I mean, we could have this conversation, and we can talk about your expertise and your insights. So why don't you start sharing your academic journey? What made you interested in Near Eastern languages and culture?
That's it's hard to narrow down, but I think the easiest way to say it is I was encouraged to go into these studies, into doctoral level academia from some of my mentors or good friends from the church. And these were older gentlemen. They're from Turabdin originally. And one thing they noticed about me was that I sort of function as a bridge between our cultures, the old world and the new world. And some of your viewers may have known me. I've spoken at a few family conferences before in the Malankara Archdiocese, or I've spoken at the Middle Eastern youth conferences in the past, so they may know me. And that fact that I am conversant in these different cultures and can contextualize the faith for people who may not be able to put it in the framework of the Western culture. Maybe people come from overseas and they land here in the diaspora somewhere, whether it's the United States, North America, Europe, somewhere. And, there's still a disconnect because the way people operate overseas and the way that people operate here in the West isn't always the same. And just being able to functionally translate the Christian Syriac experience was a value that was seen in me. And so that sort of spurred my journey. I've always been interested in things like language and ancient languages. I studied Greek and self-taught a little ancient Egyptian in undergrad. And so I had this background in Syriac through the church. And so it was nice in a way. I was formed theologically and linguistically through the church prior to my academic experience. So it gave me a bit of an advantage in some areas, and other people, people come from different backgrounds. And so whatever background they bring to their studies, is advantageous for them and helps define their journey. So from there, I contemplate, do I want to do Syriac studies? I know you've had a bunch of fantastic guests who are, they're patrologists. They study patristics. They've published on Syriac fathers. Their research is on a period or a person within our tradition. And I thought to me, I really enjoy the work of someone like Dr. Sebastian Brock. And if your audience is not familiar with his publishings, I would really recommend a number of his books, because some of them are translations from Syriac. Some of them are his own analysis, with the translations of our texts, and they'll focus on certain themes within the literature. And while he's an academic and thorough, he's also very accessible to regular folks. And that's one thing academics tend to struggle with sometimes, is that, we write for ourselves. We write for our own crowd. And while that can be, useful for furthering the academy, for furthering scholarship, gosh, it's frustrating at times, because there's so many things that just aren't published or accessible in English. And it's hard to make an impact among the people, not just the scholarly world, but among the people. And Dr. Brock really does a fine job with that. And so I enjoyed his works. And I thought to myself, well, one of the things that made him so effective is that he didn't start his journey as a Syriac scholar. He was a scholar of the Septuagint, which is the Greek Old Testament. And I thought to myself, that makes a lot of sense. He's perceiving and encountering this material from a different starting point. He's not diving in, and making Syriac the prime. It became the prime. And so for me, my spiritual life, my liturgical life, and now my home life, thank God, is engaged in the Syriac Aramaic language. I engage in the tradition daily. And so it defines me. I didn't feel the need to focus on someone like, Bar Abroyo or Mor Michael Rabo or Mor Felixenos, Mor Ephraim, whomever, right? I thought, what? Maybe it's better for me, and of course I enjoy this stuff too, to explore the roots of these cultures. And so I went and I pursued studies in Near Eastern languages and cultures. That's what my doctorate's in, as you mentioned. And, that exposed me to all of the basically languages and cultures of the ancient Near East, the ancient world, and that corpus of literature, even the archaeology of the area. Now, I'm not an archaeologist, but, I've done several courses in archaeology just to back up some of the things I do or provide additional perspective to my own research. And, now I teach things like Akkadian. Akkadian is the language of the ancient Babylonians and Assyrians. Syriac has many Akkadian words in it, for example. Done ancient, Aramaic, different dialects of Aramaic, Targumic Aramaic. And then, of course, Hebrew. I've probably done Hebrew for 7 years or so. And one of the major corpuses of literature from the ancient world from that region is the Bible, right? So I am a Bible scholar. I don't know that I would pin myself down as a Bible scholar only, but as an ancient Near Eastern scholar who utilizes a corpus of literature like the Bible in his research. And so all of these things built into who I am now, what I do, the things I write about, the things that I publish. That's the long and short of the journey. I could expand, but I'm not going to, because it would now not be exciting, and you want it exciting. So I'm going to do my best to excite the crowd.
Oh, this is exciting. Like what you said is more kind of, your passion to Syriac, and this is kind of evolving, and your academic journey is more kind of an evolving rather than, a square cut kind of approach. And it's a blessing, like, we can see how Holy Spirit is leading us to new avenues, and maybe you can witness that as well in your life and experience that as well in your life. And I heard, like, your family is, your Syriac is a spoken language in your home. Would you reflect on that aspect as well?
Yeah. So it's really fascinating. My mom's side of the family married into people from the East Syriac tradition. Um, they were Assyrians who came here almost 100 years ago after the genocide. And my wife is from Syria. And so as an American, I'm not a native Syriac speaker, but I first picked it up in church. And then from church, I began learning some of the modern dialects. And we speak a dialect here at home. My wife grew up speaking, she spoke what's called Sureth, which is modern northeastern Neo-Aramaic. And she spoke that, for the first 5 years of her life. And when she went to school in Syria, she had to learn Arabic as a second language because in the home, it was Aramaic. And so um, it's a nice thing for for me and my kids. It's cute to see the way that they pick up language,
Yep.
and it's a way to live a worldview. And so, uh, why I think it's important, and our topic today, it's a conversation on Syriac Christianity, right? It's not a conversation on you know Mike the scholar, right? It's a conversation on Syriac Christianity. Mike the scholar is just the person you're having the conversation with. And one of the things that I tend to really love about Syriac, and this applies to all languages, right? I mean, we can compare Malayalam to English, or even within the subcontinent, Malayalam versus Hindi, or any of the other 40 major and 1,000 other languages present. The language frames how you think. It draws a map around how you perceive the world. And that's deeply insightful for a language like Syriac. It's quite profound. It's a reason why the fathers in the Syriac tradition are less concerned with the minutiae of the Greek fathers and more concerned with the poetic encounter of God. And that through your study and use of the language. And so language has redefined or expanded the way I perceive the world, my encounter with reality, right? And I highly value the experience of the language. Now, I don't think anyone needs to know Syriac to be a Christian. I don't think it's mandatory. Sometimes I think if we pray in Syriac and people don't understand it, we're actually being very counterproductive, because that's not how the prayers were designed to be. Yeah, sure, they were composed in Syriac, but the liturgy is designed to imprint the divine experience, to write it on our hearts, so that we're continually reliving it. It's forming synaptic pathways, if I may speak your language, right?
Yeah.
And it's binding people to a certain experience that foretells and foreshadows the divine encounter to come. And that's the meaning prime. Now, when you know Syriac and you experience it in Syriac, all of a sudden you have, every word tells a story. There's a history and a bit of thought within that language. And it's one of the reasons why I really love it and appreciate it, and why I've integrated it into my life. I didn't seek any of this out, but I found value in it. And I think, to any of the viewers, I know while most of the ministry team here has some kind of Carolite heritage, right? I know people from all over the church, and even outside of the Syriac Orthodox Church proper, tune into Urho. And so for any of you watching, I'd really encourage study of the language. And study of the language doesn't mean you're perfect at it after you take a class or pick up a book, right? Or that there's an end date. Well, I finished 3 classes, I'm good. No, it's a starting point, and you don't have to rush. You don't have to feel like, oh, I need to know the language or I'm not going to do it. It's too hard. Forget about it. Pick it up little by little, go with whatever you can manage and keep moving forward with it the rest of your life, because it's not like you study this language for a test, for a grade. You do it as part of your what it means to be human, or for us, it amplifies what we were created to be. And so I have a lot of love and respect for it. And I hope, if nothing else from this conversation, some of your viewers might think, I'm going to pay attention to the Qurbana next time, and, like, focus on the Syriac, the meaning of the words, and not just knowing the lyrics, right?
Yeah.
I think that would be great.
Well, it's another blessing, Dr. Wingert. Like, language studies is not for everyone. I'm not a language person in the sense, like, my brain won't tune with languages, even for Syriac, for English. Other than my native language, Malayalam, I struggle with every other language, including a second language as Hindi or, language. My brain is not for language. I can think maybe in a rational terms or maybe in scientific terms, but you mentioned like the synaptic pathways, and so maybe there are a lot of people who can make use of the language aspect, like how they can enjoy the meaning as well. And as you said, every Syriac word that tells you a story, that tells you an experience of someone who encountered God and who witnessed God and who praised and glorified God with their life in a poetic, in their day-to-day life, not in a philosophical way like what we see in Greek and Latin school of thought. So, as a Syriac Orthodox faithful and an academician, tell us more about your reflections on what Syriac Christianity can offer to the modern world, especially to the younger generation.
Yeah, well, first, Achin, I want to, tell you how much I respect your humility. And, I've seen how highly functioning you are. So I'm appreciative of that. And I think what Syriac offers for modern Christianity, or for Christianity today, right? I think what we should do is look at the landscape of Christian discourse, and that, we're always using this term, we're a pearl, this hidden pearl, this treasure that's hidden, right? And so I think for a long time, the church in the West has not had an effective dialogue partner with the East. They've done well with our Chalcedonian friends in the Russian and Greek tradition, I think, and it makes sense. They're both in Europe. They're both from European traditions. There's a similar ethos, not entirely the same, but it's similar. And we're at a point in our history now, and especially over the last 20 years or so, but really going back to the 80s, where the West and the Middle East have been encountering one another for quite a substantial and meaningful period of time, and a lot of our discussions today, foreign policy discussions, trade, are related to things that happen over in that part of the world. And now, with the influx of Syriac Christians in the West, I think many of whom are seeking safety and refuge, others, have and especially before the conflicts, economic opportunity. There's any number of reasons people come here. But I think that if we were to interpret it, in a divine ontological sense, why has God put this before us? There's opportunity for Syriac Christianity to amplify the gospel in an age where there are many different schools of thought, many different conversations that are regularly at odds with one another in the West. And we can lean back on this heritage that, really goes back to the foundation and even predates. Again, that's what I study, right? I study, I put my focus largely into the time before the incarnation. And I pretty much go for the first couple hundred years, maybe 500 years after the incarnation too. But we have this tradition that goes back to the period of the incarnation and before. And so the perspective that Syriac Christianity can offer the West, I think, would really open the eyes to a lot of people who may have perceived Christianity as this, that, or the other, and not necessarily as something Semitic. I remember talking with my classmates, some of whom had taken Syriac a while back, and one thing these are Semiticists, people who do Semitic languages, things like Akkadian, Aramaic, Hebrew, etc. And they would comment, yeah, it's just so weird reading the New Testament in a Semitic language and parsing the verbs like Hebrew. And, it always sticks with me because I'm like, yeah, like Jesus, the Semite, right? It's a Semitic religion. And, it's such a Semitic religion that in every Bible, in every language, and this is the case, whether it's Greek, English, Malayalam, doesn't matter, Chinese, we have phrases in the New Testament that are in Aramaic. They're in the language of Jesus. They're in the language of our tradition. When he's on the cross, he says, Eli, Eli, mashbaqtani. When he commands door to be opened, he says, Ethpathah. When he tells the girl to rise, and I yelled at my daughter once to get up off the floor in the hallway, Tlitha qom, and I go, I just quoted the Bible. Tlitha qom, girl, get up. And so what we have to offer, I think, is a perspective really neglected, highly neglected in history. And I had a conversation a few weeks ago with someone who has a large podcast and following in the evangelical world. And thank you, Marin, I agree. Who has a large following in the evangelical world. And the things we talked about were, kind of mind-blowing for this person. And it's like, it was a heavy conversation for that person. And it's likely challenging a lot of the fundamental thoughts that the person had in regards to that person's theology. And so while Jesus is the same, while the Bible is effectively the same, right? There's some, nuances to different translations and traditions that we could say are different, but the core, the meaning behind it is the same, even if the nuance is different. Those perspectives we have in the way that our fathers talk about the faith is something that is entirely new to the experience in the West. And it's not just to Christianity in the West. I think because of how Christianity in the West has evolved, which really is it's an internal dialogue between the historical Roman Catholic tradition and then the traditions that proceeded from the reformers of the Protestant tradition. That conversation has formed the way people think about Christianity in the West, whether they're from a Christian tradition or they're not, and they're perceiving, they have their own idea of what Christianity is based on that. And so encountering Syriac thought often leaves atheists, agnostics, people of other religions really wondering, I don't know anything about this religion, other than some of the visuals, the optics, right? Seeing crosses, a priest wearing black. But then again, you look at Orthodox priests who've got long beards, and robes. So what are they? Are they, maybe there's some different religion entirely, And so, um, in short, I think we're an important and necessary dialogue partner for our neighbors around us. And it's it's why God brought the faith here. That's what I truly believe.
Absolutely. One of the thing that I always encounter, like when when people especially in my practice, when people ask me what's my name, I say Matthew with just one T. Then, oh, you are an Indian. How come you got the name Matthew? So then we need to tell the story, like Jesus had an apostle named Saint Thomas, and he was there in India. He preached gospel there even before it started spreading in Europe. So we had this conversation last time with Dr. Gianni as well. Um, Christianity is a Middle Eastern religion, and Jesus is a Middle Eastern guy, not a Yankee. Maybe that's the when we talk about conversation, so day-to-day life, I mean, so this is the starting point, like so maybe with some names, or when we can say, like I always say, like we still use the same language that Jesus used in our worship. But you can claim that you are even speaking that in your home as the same language. So, well, let's move on, switch gears, and I'm coming back to your academic interest, like the insights you gained from your studies on Near Eastern Christianity, diversity, language, expression, and culture. How can these historical and academic insights be translated into the contemporary world's context? Like, what aspects of history would be more appealing to the postmoderners? Maybe that's a heavy loaded question, but um, you know so what happens with the studies in history, like we go into the we go deeper and deeper, but just maybe a little is translated to the contemporary world. So how can we translate our insights in history to the contemporary world? Or maybe from a postmodern a person's viewpoint, like what aspects of history will be more appealing and more relevant for us?
I'd really have to think about that to give you a satisfying answer. But off the top of my head, I think knowing about Syriac Christianity um, opens the door to people who've misperceived the Middle East and India, right? I mean, Matthew with one T, how dare you? There's two T's. Well, there's no T's. Well, actually, there's a tau, but that doesn't matter. My name's Michael, right? We both have Hebrew names. And so, the fact that you're from an ancient Christian heritage of the East is something unknown to people.
Correct.
That's more exciting and exotic and excellent, than a conversation with me. But knowing the landscape of the Middle East and that it's highly diverse, that when we're talking about Syriac Christianity. We're both members of the Syriac Orthodox Church, but Syriac Christianity was much broader and was divided into different organizations and communities, depending on who was doing the dividing and when. And what that means is that the Christianity of the Middle East is both ancient and diverse. And so it often provides a lot of insight into the fact that the Middle East isn't monolithic. It's not, oh, I thought they were all Arabs over there, right? There are indigenous peoples in the Middle East the way there are indigenous peoples here in North America, for example. They have their own languages. Some of them live on things called camps that are like reservations, right? Where they were relocated from certain areas and, put into these different communities. Many of them were along the Khabur in Syria. And that really parallels some of the history of the Western world, and especially the United States. We have this history of one group coming and another group who was there before. And so it's easy to think Americans are all X, Y, or Z in the same way, it is for us to think, oh, Middle Eastern people are all X, Y, or Z. And knowing the diversity of the landscape of the Middle East, I think, can help us appreciate what goes on there a little better, because that extends to peoples who aren't even Christian or Muslim, or the diversity within the Muslim community. There's Yazidis, there's Druzis, there's Alawi, there's all sorts of different communities in the Middle East that aren't some monolith, and people have different languages. They speak Arabic, sure, and they're taught a certain type of Arabic in their schooling, so that people can. There's a high degree of mutual intelligibility beyond borders. Most people will know a couple dialects of Arabic. Many will know Egyptian, but maybe someone from a different country who goes to Egypt may be hard to understand, because they don't. While people from other countries watch Egyptian TV, maybe people aren't watching Jazeera, Syria, like northern Syrian TV, or they don't know the Gulf Arabic so well, or try listening to Moroccan, right? Like, it's complicated, and it's a diverse place. And so I think it opens the door to more sophisticated conversations, and that's where I think its value is, just at a historical level. If we think beyond that, maybe at theological levels, that's where the historical theology becomes important too, because there's a long established tradition of thought that, like you said, predates certain countries. Northern Europe, for example, was not Christian until several hundred years after the incarnation. And here in different parts of the Indian subcontinent, to include the country of India and other places like Pakistan, Afghanistan, we have historical Christianity at an earlier period. Same with Ethiopia and other places like this. So that's the simplest answer I can give. Maybe we can explore it more. There's a detailed question.
Yeah. So can we go back to one of the comments from the viewers? Like, so this is, how do we start the conversation? Can you see?
How do we start the conversation? Who are you talking to? But that's that question and my answer, I think, are both important, because how do we have the conversation ultimately means we have to know who we're talking to. And this is something that is a major theological point for us as Eastern Christians. And I could say Syriac Christians in particular, but it's not necessarily something limited to Syriac Christianity. You know who you're talking to by getting to know somebody, by sitting with somebody. And the way I'm going to talk to you, Achin, is different than the way I'll talk to maybe my family members or my in-laws or my neighbors, or my students, or the lady at the cashier at the grocery store, right? Everyone has a different history, a different background. Salamu fakir nega. Nice to have you with us. everyone has a different background, a different story, a different set of circumstances in their life, different profession. And if you see them in a professional setting, you're going to know them differently. If you encounter someone as a patient, it's going to be different if you encounter them at a yard sale, at in a classroom, as a fellow student, or at your church, right? And so relationships are defined very differently. And so getting to know who you're talking to is what will let you know what doors to open to have a conversation. Because I'm not a salesman. I serve the Patriarchal Committee for Missions. But one thing about Orthodox Christianity is we don't recruit. We're not recruiters, right? We don't have a quota. It's not about pulling in numbers, but instead it's about teaching. It's about educating others. And when you encounter another person, you're encountering someone who's in the image and likeness of God. Now, how you encounter that person is going to, or who that person is, may define that encounter in a specific way or another. But you're encountering someone in the image and likeness of the divine, right? And this is the one of the major motivating thoughts of Syriac Christianity. From, to bring it back to how important it is to our tradition, says that God put on Adam, which is the Hebrew word for man, human, right? God put on Adam so that man could put on God. In other words, or what other fathers from the Greek-speaking tradition said, God became man so that man could become divine, right? A similar thought. And this process happens when we perceive someone in the image and likeness of God. And so when you step outside yourself, when it's no longer about you, who do you encounter but God and your neighbor, right? And these are the commandments we're called to follow, to love the Lord your God and your neighbor as yourself. So we can't provide a simple answer for that question, but we can provide a thought for the person or people that we encounter. And so that thought is, how do I get to know this person? Who is this person? And knowing the person is what will let you know what opens the doors to that conversation. And maybe it's the way it was opened with you, where, my name is, Matthew with one T. You're right, Matthew with one T. And so, yeah, but you're from India. Here we go. Now the door is open.
Yep.
Yeah. And like you said, St. Thomas, in the tradition of Eastern Christianity, Syriac Christianity, our words in Kerala are different. Like baptism is an English word from Greek, baptismos, but people say mamodisa, right, which is their version of mamoditho. And so, you'll say tomb, in our Western or English language tradition, you'll say qabara, right? Qabara is from, qabro. And so it's Syriac, right? So, I mean, there's a different historical strand that makes it a long conversation possible, right? But that opened the door in your case. In someone else's case, it may be different. And names are an interesting one. Sometimes appearance is another. I know after 9/11, someone had gone to one of our priests who was frequently traveling, I think to Texas actually, because we didn't have a priest there at the time. And at the airport, forgive me, I don't know the title, the woman behind the desk, before you get onto the plane, someone can jump in the chat, and the clerk, I don't know, she got to know this priest, because he traveled so frequently or regularly. And she had asked him, "Excuse me, Father," who's wearing a cross, right? "Are you a Muslim?" And so that conversation, before he's just a priest, but he's from Syria, he has a beard, right? Like he looks the type. The conversation doesn't happen, but then the door opens, right? And yeah, for us, we're like, how do you come up with that question? But, people just don't know. And, there's all sorts of different opportunities. And I know that's not a specific answer, but I think what it does is hopefully make us mindful of the ways we can share our tradition, and it's a fine line too. I mean, we don't want to, today we're fasting, right? Or sun's down now, maybe you're eating. So, but if you're eating veggie on Wednesday and Friday, and normally you don't, you can, maybe that is someone goes, why aren't you having the hamburger? Oh, I just don't feel like it, right? But they keep pressing you on it, then, well, in our tradition, we don't. You don't want to show off. You don't want to necessarily flag,
Yeah.
yourself as doing something like fasting, but an opportunity may arise where you need to discern, is this an opportunity that the person's genuinely interested in who I am and what defines me? Or is it something else, and that's all I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, it's as you said, being mindful and have the attitude, the right approach, not to impose your heritage or, your knowledge, but to share to the fellow being, again, as the image and likeness of God. That's an excellent way of, starting a conversation, I guess. Now, um, we mentioned, like, you have been instrumental and as a part of developing Agora University. Maybe this is the first university in the United States that teaches theology and history from the Oriental Orthodox perspective. So would you reflect on your involvement with Agora University?
Yeah, it's a heck of a thing. So, it actually happened, not really intentionally. We had been asking different hierarchs for a long time to do something more regular, in terms of education. And there were a number of us scholars who were Orthodox, and people had asked us to give talks, right? And that's one of the reasons why I went into scholarship, because I was talking and teaching at the churches. And those of us who came together with these advanced degrees found ourselves regularly teaching, to the point where people said they wanted classes, like, can you give us a class on this topic or that topic? And so we started developing curriculum. But we thought, we're not a seminary. We don't want to prep people for priesthood, right? For ministry, for direct, like, ecclesiastical ministry. We want to provide our perspective and include our own history, culture, and tradition. In other words, our particularity, the things that define us, in conversation with those other topics they may be having at their secular universities, or, maybe it's a Catholic or Protestant university, something. But mainstream universities, right? Mainstream universities will often offer classes that either directly or indirectly treat topics that our youth or our young people, our young professionals are interested in. And so we wanted to be able to provide a framework for being able to dialogue with mainstream scholarship. And so as that started to happen, we realized it's important not to, leave the seminaries to the churches and the ecclesiastical bodies. What we want to do then is focus on our talents and use that as a foundation for developing not a theological college per se, or only a theological college, but for developing a university proper. And so because we have, teachers, from the Malankara tradition, from the Syriac Middle Eastern tradition, from the Coptic tradition. We have a lot of representation from the Coptic Orthodox tradition. We even have, we have Ethiopian Orthodox scholars who teach at Agora, and we have some of our friends from the Greek Orthodox Church and Byzantine Catholic Church. And so we're Eastern Christian focused, and we are using that foundation to develop an entire not necessarily entire, but a highly targeted university. So this year we've announced, quite recently, actually, I think it was about a month ago, maybe less, the Sawiris School of Business, which is offering an MBA, and is named after our chairman, Mr. Naguib Sawiris. If you don't know who Mr. Naguib Sawiris is, please look him up. He's a very important figure in the business world, in the world, and not just in Europe or Africa, but also Asia and many other locations. And through being able to inspire the future generation of leaders, we knew we had a real opportunity in front of us, where education is transforming. And COVID, this situation really pushed everyone into our ballpark. But we are an online institution, and now everyone's going online. It's becoming more mainstream. It's like when people used bulletin boards when they'd call in on a slow modem before there was like a connected internet that was popularized by AOL and things like that. We were there, right? And now, oh, you're in a chat room. What's wrong with you? Like, why don't you go out? And now everyone's chatting, and like this generation doesn't know any different, right? So in the same way, we have been preparing this university. We're hoping to expand into several different categories that are going to be of vital importance to Eastern Christian communities that will have an impact on the world proper. So our office is based in Northern Virginia, outside DC, and we want to make sure that we educate future leaders, not just of the church, but of the world. And people need to know about our traditions, our communities especially. There's people who I know have been assigned to different regions of the Middle East who don't know anything about the Christians there, know nothing. They've never heard the word Syriac or Assyrian or anything Chaldean, anything like this. And so it's an opportunity that has to be undertaken. And the foundation of that is our particularity, the thing that makes us as Eastern Christians unique, our way of perceiving the world, that worldview I talked about earlier. And not just through, we're not just Syriac. I mean, we've got, we have 5 technically people who are in the organization, but there's 3 instructors in the organization who are of the Syriac Orthodox tradition, but a lot more who are Coptic, right? And so we all have similar goals, and we're forming important networks. And where we are in terms of theology is we started with that because not just the theology, but even the humanities side of our different topics, right? If you're doing dogmatics, you're also doing philosophy. You're not necessarily, going to do a philosophy degree, but you're going to learn the conversations that are defining the way people think today. If people are wondering why academics and people entrenched in academia speak a certain way or have a certain view of the world, and they don't, it's because there's this gap. There isn't that dialogue that's taking place. And we have this opportunity right now to emerge in a world that really needs some kind of remedy for communication. And the core is our MTS and MTH programs. They're both, theological studies in the Eastern Christian tradition. But like I said, now we have a School of Business. It offers an accredited MBA. So, little by little, we're going to expand to more schools. God willing, we'll have a medical school someday. Why not? We have tons of doctors from our traditions already. Why not organize that? Why not put it together so that we can continue that tradition and produce more and more healers for this world, at the physical level, and who can serve the world. I mean, we should not be physicians for for the economic advantage of it, but for, its ability to let us partake in the divine nature, as Peter talks about. And so to be partakers of divine nature, we can be healers. And in fact, I would argue our church's tradition, Syriac Christianity's tradition, is specifically a healing theological tradition. If you listen to the lyrics, the words behind our chants, our literature, you realize, wow, these people, they thought in terms of medicine. And so all that to say, as an institution, we're not focused on only the theology itself, but how we may be an expression of that, how we can use that to form everything else we learn. And so hopefully in the next year, something else will happen. In the next year, we'll expand. And, we have several plans to go beyond and, continue our growth and development. If you want to check out the website, anyone's watching, it's agora.ac, agora, agora.ac, or I think ssb.ac is the School of Business. And, it's an interesting name. We've gone through a little development over the years in terms of our name. We started as an academic society, and we called it the St. Cyril Society. And from that society that was being asked to teach people things, we formed the Holy Transfiguration College, which is the theological part, and the university proper is the Agora. What's an Agora? It's that meeting place. It means to gather, and it's a word known to both Greek and Semitic tradition, and it may even go back to Sumerian for an outdoor sanctuary. But it's this idea of a gathering place, right? In the Semitic tradition, it tends to refer to gathering. In the Greek tradition, it tends to refer to the market where those gathered goods were brought. And so it's a gathering place for trade, of course. Sometimes you'll see agora to refer to a market, and people based in market-focused economics, they'll refer to themselves as following an agora model or whatever. But, for us, we're really focusing on the fact that it was the place where ideas met, where conversations met, where people who believe different things were able to think with one another, and geez Louise, I think we need something like that right now. We need to be able to have conversations and have difficult conversations and have interesting conversations and, listen and learn where other people are coming from and, have a place to be heard. And that's the image and idea behind the effort. And so, it happened with small intention and big response to a need that people had and came to us for, and slowly grew into, this institution. And now, thank God we have the blessings of His Holiness, Mar Ignatius from Traiano, and also His Holiness Mortawadros Traiano of the Coptic Church. So both the Coptic Pope and the Syriac Patriarch, they know very much about us, and they said, God bless you in your work, do well. And one of our bishops sits on our advisory board, Mar Dionysius Jean Kawak. He's the Archbishop of the Eastern Archdiocese of the United States. We also have some Coptic bishops affiliated with it. One of them is the late Bishop Epiphanios, who was formerly the head of our advisory board. So while we are not an ecclesiastical body, we are not, administered by a church diocese or anything. We are faithful who are highly, highly motivated and blessed by those, who oversee the churches in the four corners of the world. So it's a process, and, we're, God willing, going to give something great to future generations. And we are, we're very much in our own ancient educational tradition, whether it's from Alexandria in Egypt, or whether it's from the school of Edessa. Like we're inheritors of that,
Yeah.
and we take it upon ourselves to live up to our own history, and to know that we're living church history, right? The things we do, people will write about in future generations. They'll write about these times. They'll write about how church has changed in the West. They'll write about the things that people did, and we should be mindful of that too.
Yeah. Excellent. God bless this initiative, and I'm also blessed to be part of that as a student. You have been not part, but a key member of the Syriac Orthodox Patriarchal Committee for Missions. What are the activities happening with the mission and evangelism of the Syriac Orthodox Church? We have 4 more minutes. Maybe you can reflect.
Yeah, you can shut me down time-wise whenever you want, or we can just talk until we're done. I'll let you take control. But, I wouldn't give myself that much importance. There's people doing a lot more work than me, and we should pray for them. And so your viewers, I hope, and even those who are not watching now, even though it's early enough in Kerala, you should be having your breakfast, watching this, and being very happy. Please pray for us. Pray for everyone involved. Pray for the church. We have some very active people who are, we could call them evangelists, I suppose, or missionaries, or people who are missionary-minded members of the church, whether they're clergy or laity. But we also, it's a revived thing. The Syriac Church was the greatest missionary church in world history. And so you, Achin, are a testimony to that, right? Your heritage in India, right. As the lone community that survived. There are many places like Kerala, where there's North India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Central Asia, and as far into the east, even in places like China and Mongolia. And so we are in an interesting phase, because while that's part of our history, some people didn't grow up experiencing the church that way. It was insular for many people, and it was a place where they could be whatever they were on a Sunday, And so one of the things that's a challenge for us is developing a new crop of inspired people to not only make their faith survive, but flourish, and to look at it as a gift, that there's others who would want to partake in such a gift. And what's interesting about right now is that the unfortunate world events that have happened in the Middle East to the church, to the people, the suffering that they have endured, has also planted the seeds for the expansion of the church all over the world. And now people who never knew about us, they're investigating us, and they're knowing the names of our fathers, and starting to learn about, wow, the way they perceive the world, and their encounter with Christ. It's different than what I grew up with. And I feel satisfied. You go to bed and you wake up refreshed. It's that kind of feeling. You don't wake up groggy and I got to go to work. This is miserable. So people are finding us, and now it's finding, do they really want to be part of the church, or do they, are they just fascinated by the church? And, what place do people, what place does this faith have in their part of the world? Because you would be surprised at some of the places where we're growing and where there's interest. And, thank God for it. I wish more people would be involved. We're hoping to, continue developing and expanding. But if people want to learn more about it, you can contact you or me, and we can hopefully find ways to involve others and, continue to see the church grow and flourish like it is in places like Latin America, right? Like we're growing exponentially there. But at the same time, if we grow too fast, what are we growing? We're not recruiters. We don't want to recruit. We want to transform people's lives. We want to make people better. We want to make the world a better place. We want to bring the Malkuth of the Shemayo, the kingdom of God on earth. And that's bringing peace to the world. And while these sound like, grand ideas and cliche in a way, like it's at the heart of who and what we are and how we go about our encounter with the world. So that's over your time, but it's still short. We could do a whole session on missions someday if you need to.
Yeah, that will be interesting. Like, because mission is one of the key things. Like you mentioned that people are searching for us, and that's a miserable situation. We are supposed to reach out and spread the good news, but the scenario in Middle East and the Indian setting, these are not in favor of a mission oriented church. Rather than we are surviving, maybe day by day we are struggling to survive, given the persecution and given the historical aspects, and given the exodus that we have to go through. So the history always push us away from the core aspect of Christian ministry, reaching out to the ends of the world and being part and instruments of the kingdom of God, as you mentioned. Can you find, maybe in 1 or 2 minutes, reflect upon how can the laity take part in the mission of the church? Share your reflections, and we'll close this session.
I think the best way to get started is be a mission to ourselves. That the church is not a place, it's a community. It's a community that gathers around a meal. It's an aito. It's not just a, kensho. A kensho is a gathering, and it's like, that's how this ecclesia, the calling out toward a gathering, comes in the other traditions. But the Syriac tradition, our word for it, is a different word. It's not a gathering, or it's not calling people to be gathered like kensho. It's aito, that place where the feast happens. And so that feast is the qurbana, the korbono, the divine Eucharist, and we center around this. And the thing that laity can do is be mindful of that. Your church is not a team. I'm very much Yan Yakubana. I'm Yakuba all the way. But that's not the church. You're not on a team. You are not on a team. You're a human being created in the image and likeness of God, and your calling is to go home. You are on a journey. You are a someone who is lost, and once you've found out the way, the Urho, you start walking home. You go on your journey home, and that home is with our Lord. This is the first thing to do. That part of that journey means actually understand, like, pay attention to the words you pray in the Qurbana. Meditate upon them. Think about them. There's so much richness and wisdom in the Qurbana. The Qurbana itself is designed for illiterate people to be theologians. You don't need to learn how to read or write anything, but if you know the lyrics, you pray them, you encounter them visually, orally, through your sense of smell, your taste and touch, right? Like, we are enraptured by the senses, and our senses teach us and provide an experience that now those lyrics have a different meaning. They have a totally different meaning than if we just make them pretty songs. It's not about the songs. It's about the depth of it. Meditate on that depth, encounter that depth, go into it, and go into the prayer books, the Shemo, all the other things like this. And all of a sudden you will find yourself changing. And as you change and as you work on getting that log out, right, as we all work on getting the log out of our own eyes, the world starts changing. We encounter people differently. We have different conversations with people. These things happen naturally. And the things we don't have conversations about will be different too. That's the foundation of what it means to be a Christian, what it means to be sent out. This is our word for missionary is not about the work, the mission. It's about shlichurtho, being sent out somewhere. Like that's apostleship, and that's what Christ is. He's sent out to be incarnate among us, right? And to teach us this way toward unity with God. And so start there, start with your own focus and develop yourself. As you develop, everything's going to change. Everything's going to change. And little by little, whatever happens will grow from that.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining this conversation. And, your words are encouraging. Your words, your wisdom and insight, that means a lot to the viewers. I'm praying that, the same Holy Spirit that acted on you and guided you in your life, in your ministry, in all the things that you are doing, be rest upon us and continue to transform us so that we all work together towards the kingdom of God and upholding our heritage, our Syriac tradition, and our Oriental Orthodox perspective to this modern world, and reflecting upon the daily challenges and daily demands of the modern life as well. So God bless, and thank you so much. Thank you so much, all the viewers. And we have a lot of thank you messages from many of the viewers. And please do share these videos. Please be part of our mission activities as well. Good night, and have a good day to all those who are watching from India. Thank you, Dr. Mike.
Thank you so much, Achin. If I said anything good, it was from the Spirit. And if I erred in anything, it was totally myself. So pray for me, and may all the viewers pray for me as well. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.